My beloved child. Listen carefully, because what you are about to hear was never meant to reach you this soon. There is a quiet shift happening around you, subtle enough to be ignored by most, yet powerful enough to change the direction of your life if left unnoticed. You may feel that something is off, like the air around you has grown heavier without reason. Small moments feel different now. Conversations pause at the wrong time. Smiles arrive late. Silences stay longer than they should. This is not coincidence. This is awareness knocking gently before it is forced to shout. Someone close to your daily routine has been observing you longer than you realize, not with admiration, but with calculation. They are not rushing, because patience is their strongest disguise. Every step they take looks harmless. Every word they speak sounds ordinary. That is how plans hide best, behind normalcy. What makes this more serious is not intention alone, but timing. The moment you started becoming emotionally stronger, mentally clearer, and more self-directed, their behavior shifted. They noticed your growth before you did. And that is where concern begins. This story is not about fear. It is about clarity. Because when you understand what is unfolding, you stop being vulnerable. Right now, the most important thing is not action, but attention. Attention to patterns. Attention to energy. Attention to what no one says out loud. Before you dismiss this as imagination, pause and look back at recent events with fresh eyes. Think of that unexpected resistance you faced when you tried to make a positive change. Think of the subtle discouragement masked as concern. Think of advice that felt supportive, yet somehow drained your confidence. These were not random moments. They were tests. Silent measurements to see how much control still exists over your decisions. The person involved does not need to confront you directly. Their strategy is softer, quieter, and far more effective. They plant doubt and let you water it yourself. They introduce confusion and wait for you to question your own instincts. This is why you have felt torn lately, unsure whether to trust your inner voice or external opinions. That inner conflict was not born within you. It was encouraged. And the most unsettling truth is this. The closer someone appears to your emotional circle, the easier it becomes for them to influence your perception of reality. They know your strengths, so they aim at your moments of exhaustion. They know your values, so they twist situations to make you compromise them slightly, just enough to weaken your boundaries. Nothing extreme. Nothing obvious. Just enough to shift the balance slowly, so you never notice the exact moment things changed. Now understand this deeply. The plan is not sudden. It unfolds in layers. First, they seek access to your trust. Then, they subtly question your decisions. After that, they position themselves as necessary, as the only one who understands you. This creates dependence without you ever agreeing to it. You begin to second-guess yourself, while relying more on their input. That is the turning point they wait for. Because once self-trust weakens, influence becomes effortless. You may have already noticed how certain conversations leave you feeling smaller, even though no harsh words were spoken. How certain interactions drain your energy without clear reason. That is emotional manipulation operating quietly. And the reason this matters now is because the next phase is closer than you think. The next phase is isolation. Not physical isolation, but emotional narrowing. A world where you start sharing less with others, listening less to alternative views, and depending more on one source of validation. This is how control grows without force. And control, once established, always seeks to protect itself, even if it means hurting the one it holds. There is something else you must know, and it may surprise you. This situation did not begin because you are weak. It began because you are strong. Because you possess something that others notice, even when you try to stay quiet. It could be your resilience. It could be your empathy. It could be your ability to rise after setbacks. Whatever it is, it triggered insecurity in someone who feels threatened by your potential independence. Instead of improving themselves, they chose a different path. They chose to limit you. Not openly, but invisibly. And that is why this message reaches you now. Because awareness breaks invisible chains. The moment you see the pattern, it loses power. The moment you stop internalizing doubt that was never yours, clarity returns. You are not imagining the tension. You are not overthinking the shifts. Your intuition has been alerting you, but you may have ignored it out of kindness or loyalty. Loyalty is admirable, but not when it costs you your inner peace. Protection of self is not selfish. It is necessary. As this unfolds, remember one critical truth. You are not powerless here. The person planning this relies on your unawareness. They rely on your habit of giving benefit of the doubt. They rely on your silence. And most importantly, they rely on your belief that nothing serious is happening. That belief is their shield. Once it cracks, their influence weakens rapidly. You do not need confrontation. You do not need accusations. You only need clarity and distance where needed. Observe without reacting. Listen without absorbing. Respond without revealing too much. This is how you regain balance. This is how you protect yourself without creating chaos. What comes next will reveal even more, because every plan leaves traces once you know where to look. And now, you are beginning to see. There is a moment when silence speaks louder than any voice, and this is that moment for you. What has been hidden so carefully is beginning to surface, not through dramatic events, but through small inconsistencies that refuse to stay buried. Notice how certain people suddenly become overly curious about your plans. Notice how your future decisions are questioned more than your past mistakes. This is not concern. This is monitoring. Someone is trying to understand how much influence they still hold over your direction. They ask casual questions, but listen with intense focus. They remember details you never thought mattered. They bring up topics at precise times, as if they knew exactly when your guard would be lowest. This is intentional. They are mapping your emotional landscape, identifying where you hesitate, where you hope, and where you feel unsure. Because once those areas are known, they become points of entry. You are not being watched in an obvious way. You are being studied through familiarity. And familiarity is the easiest place to hide intentions. What makes this situation more complex is the emotional history involved. Shared memories create blind spots. Long conversations create comfort. And comfort, when unchecked, lowers awareness. This person does not see themselves as wrong. In their mind, they are justified. They believe they know what is best for you, even if it limits you. This belief gives them confidence to interfere quietly. They may compare your present self to your past self, subtly implying that you were better before certain changes. They may highlight risks without acknowledging opportunities. They may remind you of past struggles while ignoring your growth. Each word is carefully chosen to sound logical, even caring. But the outcome is always the same. You feel hesitant. You pause. You delay. That delay is exactly what they need. Because while you hesitate, they retain relevance. While you doubt, they remain central. This is not accidental behavior. It is a pattern reinforced over time. Here is what you must understand now. Influence does not require authority. It only requires emotional access. And emotional access is gained through trust built over time. This is why the situation feels confusing. You do not want to believe that someone familiar could limit you intentionally. That resistance within you is natural. But truth does not disappear because it is uncomfortable. It simply waits. And now, it is asking you to pay attention. Reflect on how often you have adjusted your choices after speaking with this person. Reflect on how often you have felt the need to explain yourself to them. Those are signs of imbalance. Healthy connections do not require constant justification. They do not make you feel smaller for dreaming bigger. They do not leave you emotionally tired after simple interactions. When energy drains repeatedly from the same source, it is not coincidence. It is a signal. Something else is unfolding quietly. The person involved senses that their influence may be slipping. That awareness creates urgency. Urgency changes behavior. You may notice increased involvement, sudden advice, or unexpected emotional reactions when you assert independence. This is not random. It is a response to perceived loss of control. They may frame their words as protection, but protection that restricts growth is not protection at all. It is preservation of comfort. Their comfort. Not yours. This is why boundaries matter now more than ever. Not harsh boundaries, but clear ones. Less sharing. More observing. Less reacting. More grounding. When you shift internally, the external dynamic changes automatically. You do not need to announce anything. Your calm detachment will speak for you. And it will unsettle those who relied on your emotional availability. Remember this clearly as you move forward. You are allowed to evolve beyond the version of yourself that others are comfortable with. You are allowed to outgrow dynamics that no longer align with your direction. Awareness is not betrayal. It is self-respect. What you are realizing now is only the surface. There are deeper layers yet to be revealed, patterns that will soon become impossible to ignore. But for now, the most powerful thing you can do is stay present, stay observant, and stay grounded in your own truth. The moment you stop seeking validation from the wrong place, the entire structure built around influence begins to weaken. And once that happens, everything changes. At some point, awareness sharpens so quietly that you only realize it after the shift has already happened. This is where you are now. The fog is thinning, and what once felt confusing is beginning to form clear outlines. You are starting to notice that certain reactions around you feel rehearsed rather than natural. Certain responses arrive too quickly, as if prepared in advance. This is not imagination. This is recognition. Someone has been adjusting their behavior based on your reactions, learning how to guide conversations, influence moods, and redirect outcomes without appearing forceful. They are skilled at sounding reasonable. They know how to frame their words so you question yourself instead of them. And the reason this realization matters so much is because once you see the structure behind the behavior, you stop internalizing its effects. You begin to understand that the pressure you felt was never proof of your weakness. It was evidence of someone else's strategy. There is a specific pattern you should reflect on now. Moments when you felt confidence suddenly followed by subtle discomfort. Decisions that felt right until someone's opinion introduced hesitation. Plans that excited you until doubt appeared from an external voice. These emotional shifts were not spontaneous. They were guided. The person involved understands timing better than content. They know when to speak, not just what to say. They wait for moments when you are tired, emotionally open, or seeking reassurance. Then they step in, not to support fully, but to reshape your certainty. This is why their influence felt strong without being obvious. It was never loud. It was persistent. And persistence, when wrapped in familiarity, becomes powerful. But power built on subtle pressure is fragile. It depends entirely on your continued unawareness. The moment you pause instead of reacting, that power begins to fade. Now here is something rarely spoken, yet deeply important. People who seek this kind of influence are often driven by fear of being left behind. Your growth represents change, and change threatens their sense of stability. Instead of adapting, they attempt to anchor you to an older version of yourself. They remind you of who you were, not to honor your journey, but to limit your future. This is why their narratives feel nostalgic, focused on the past, highlighting old bonds, old struggles, old identities. It keeps you emotionally anchored. But you are not meant to remain where you once survived. You are meant to move toward where you can thrive. Recognizing this does not require anger. It requires honesty. Honesty with yourself about how you feel after certain interactions. About whether you feel expanded or restricted. About whether your inner voice feels clearer or quieter. As this awareness grows, you may notice a subtle shift within yourself. You respond less. You explain less. You feel less urgency to justify your choices. This is not withdrawal. This is alignment. You are beginning to trust your own perspective again. And that trust changes everything. When you stop feeding confusion, clarity strengthens. When you stop offering emotional access automatically, influence weakens. This does not mean cutting people off suddenly. It means adjusting the level of access they have to your inner world. Not everyone needs to know your plans. Not everyone deserves insight into your next steps. Privacy is not secrecy. It is protection. And protection, when chosen consciously, restores balance faster than confrontation ever could. Understand this final truth for now. The situation you are becoming aware of was never meant to break you. It was meant to reveal you. To show you where your boundaries needed strengthening. To remind you of the importance of self-trust. You are not late in realizing this. You are right on time. Because now, you can choose differently. You can move forward with clarity instead of confusion. With intention instead of hesitation. And as this continues, more pieces will align, more patterns will reveal themselves. What once felt like a silent pressure will lose its grip. Because awareness, once awakened, does not return to sleep. There comes a stage where truth no longer arrives as a shock, but as confirmation of what your soul already suspected. This is that stage. You may feel calmer now, not because the situation is resolved, but because confusion is losing its grip. When clarity enters, fear weakens. You begin to notice how certain narratives around you repeat themselves, almost mechanically. The same concerns are raised again and again. The same doubts are recycled in different forms. The same outcomes are subtly pushed as inevitable. This repetition is not accidental. It is reinforcement. Someone wants a specific version of reality to feel natural to you, even if it does not align with your inner knowing. Repetition shapes belief when left unquestioned. But now, you are questioning. And that changes the dynamic completely. The influence that once felt heavy now feels transparent. You can see where it begins and where it ends. And once edges are visible, control dissolves. Pay attention to how your emotional responses have shifted. Situations that once triggered anxiety now create distance instead. Words that once unsettled you now feel predictable. This is not numbness. This is discernment. You are no longer absorbing everything directed toward you. You are filtering. That is a sign of regained inner authority. The person who relied on emotional closeness to guide outcomes can sense this shift. They may appear unsettled, uncertain, or unusually attentive. This is not because they suddenly changed. It is because their usual methods are no longer landing the same way. Influence loses strength when awareness replaces reaction. When you stop responding automatically, you take back space. And space is powerful. In that space, your thoughts become your own again. Your decisions feel lighter. Your direction feels clearer. This is not coincidence. This is the natural result of alignment. There is also a deeper layer to understand now. Control does not always seek dominance. Sometimes it seeks relevance. Sometimes the fear is not about losing you, but about losing importance in your life. This fear can drive subtle interference masked as involvement. Advice becomes frequent. Opinions become persistent. Presence becomes constant. Not because you asked, but because distance feels threatening to them. Yet your growth was never meant to be negotiated. You do not need permission to evolve. You do not need consensus to move forward. The moment you internalize this, guilt begins to fade. You stop feeling responsible for managing someone else's emotional comfort at the cost of your own clarity. That release is quiet, but profound. It marks the return of self-respect. As you move through this phase, restraint becomes your strength. You do not reveal everything you realize. You do not announce your boundaries. You simply live them. You choose what to share. You choose when to engage. You choose when silence is the wiser response. This is not avoidance. This is mastery of self. When you act from a grounded place, the external noise loses urgency. You are no longer pulled into emotional explanations or defensive positions. You observe. You decide. You proceed. This steadiness unsettles those who depended on your emotional reactions. Because without reaction, there is nothing to shape, nothing to redirect, nothing to control. Calm becomes your shield. Let this be clear as you continue. You are not imagining the relief you feel. You are not becoming distant without reason. You are becoming centered. And centered individuals are difficult to influence without consent. What once felt like pressure now feels like background noise. What once felt confusing now feels obvious. This is progress. And it will continue. Because once you reclaim your inner clarity, no hidden plan can survive long in its presence. The truth does not need force to stand. It only needs light. And you are already providing it. Now comes the phase where everything aligns so quietly that it feels almost unreal. This is the moment when you stop searching for signs, because the signs start revealing themselves without effort. Conversations feel transparent. Intentions feel readable. You no longer feel the need to decode behavior, because your clarity does it automatically. This is not because others changed. It is because you did. Your perception sharpened. And when perception sharpens, hidden motives lose their camouflage. The person who once relied on subtle influence now appears uncertain, even hesitant. Their words carry less weight. Their presence feels smaller. Not because they diminished, but because you expanded. This shift is irreversible. Once awareness settles into your core, it does not fade. It becomes your new normal. You may notice that peace has started replacing urgency. You are no longer in a rush to explain yourself or prove your intentions. Silence feels comfortable now, not empty. That comfort is powerful. It signals emotional independence. When you no longer seek reassurance from the same place that once created doubt, control dissolves completely. The connection changes shape. Influence gives way to distance. Not forced distance, but natural separation. Like two paths slowly diverging without conflict. This is how freedom often arrives. Quietly. Gently. Without announcement. And the most surprising part is this. You do not feel loss. You feel relief. Because what was weighing you down was never love or care.